All right, good morning. We will have a quorum shortly, I'm sure, because some of the trustees said they'd be here, but I'm assuming because of the weather it's been a little slow, but we can go ahead and we've got two citizens to be heard, and so we can go ahead with that. Jeff, yeah, if you'd give us your name and where you live. And
well, I'd rather wait for quorum.
Oh, well.
I'll just wait. Thank you.
Okay. Tom.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Tom Knutson, and I work for a nonprofit called CityCare, and I manage a program within CityCare called the Oklahoma City Day Shelter for the Homeless. And we work with the homeless population in our city and aid them with social services and support to help them move forward and get off the street. And it was my intention to come to this meeting just to publicly thank Embark for coming out to our facility and taking a genuine interest in the needs of our folks that we serve. And I want to commend you guys for what you all are already doing. For that, specifically the third Friday of the month, the free bus service has been tremendously helpful to our folks. Also, the Embark Plus service we've utilized for a lot of the people that we've gotten off the streets and into housing, and who otherwise wouldn't have a means of getting to doctor's appointments, social service appointments, who are medically disabled, have been able to take advantage of that. And so, again, I just wanted to thank you all for just what you're doing in the community on behalf of our city's most vulnerable. And I really just wanted to come to this meeting just to better understand the ins and outs of the bus system, and look forward to ways we can partner in the future.
Where are you located, and do people come to your office?
We're at 3rd and Virginia. So we run the day shelter in partnership with the Homeless Alliance. And it's a resource center. We see about 300 to 300 folks a day who are chronically homeless, most of whom are homeless. And we have about 32 different agencies, nonprofits that are on site there. And so the idea is to have all the resources in one place so people can access what they need as a one-stop shop, as opposed to going from appointment to appointment across town. So anyway, but Jason and Chip came out a while back, and we got a tour of the place, and we had a really encouraging conversation about just what it would look like to have a bus stop there in the future. And
so there is bus service at your location?
Not at the location, but it's down about a quarter of a mile up the road on Linwood and Main, is the nearest bus stop. So anyway, but we have a curb cut at our facility that has the potential for it to be a bus stop. And so we just kind of discussed some possibilities around that. And but anyway, I just wanted to offer my sincere thank you for being responsive to us in a rather quick manner too, and look forward to possibilities in the future.
Jason, a few years ago we had a program where we handed out bus passes to homeless, or we still have that, or?
Yeah, we haven't had that program for a couple of years now. What we have done is, as part of our schedule of fees, we've offered a 7.7% discount to any agency that wants to buy bus passes in bulk. So is your agency buying passes?
We do. Yeah, okay. We have about 100 a month that we give out.
That's what I was trying to figure out, if we're assisting you with in a manner there that's helpful to you.
Yeah, and we give those to people who have done work around the day shelter and helped out with chores, and or if they have a job interview to get to, medical appointment, things like that. So, but yeah, and that's again, that's been helpful to us as well. And it comes down to about 100 a month.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming, and I encourage you to continue to be in communication with the staff on anything that that you need to provide the services you're providing.
Sure. Thank you for letting me be here. Mm-hmm. Let me share.
Just real quick, I got to tour your facilities just 2 weekends ago. Julie Porter invited me to tour them. The entire Homeless Alliance, actually, where you all are located. What else I know you've had these conversations with Chip and Jason. I just haven't been part of them quite yet. I know what Julie said to me. What else in terms of transportation would help you all? I love 100 bus passes. That seems great. The shelter being closer, okay. But, you know, Julie was talking to me about how the day shelter, it's day shelter, right? So there's no, what are you hearing at night about the homeless, and how are they getting around our city, and where are they going?
Right. Well, I know the Sunday service has been a tremendous help. Most of our folks, I'd say, well, I couldn't give you a number, maybe 40, 50, maybe half of our folks come on bikes. One of the things that I've been looking into is what it would look like to have a bike repair station there at the day shelter. And, but that's been, you know, they either come on foot. Most of our folks are sleeping under bridges or in overpasses and tents, and they either come on foot or they come on bikes. But outside of the city bus system, there's really not a whole lot of transportation options for folks who are transient and homeless. A very, very small percentage of people sleep in their cars out in the parking lot and in different locations in the city. But it's fairly slim. You mean just outside of the day shelter hours? Yeah.
And then are we finding that our homeless population, that their origin story begins somewhere within this inner core, or are they throughout the entire metro? You see that? Because then transportation becomes a bigger issue if they're closer up to Guthrie or they're out by Deer Creek or something. Where are we seeing this?
Yeah. So we did the point in time count back in, I believe it was January. It's once a year where we send volunteers out into the community to go to known transient campsites where people are staying. There's actually a map that shows where some of the common campsites, and most of those are in the downtown area or west of downtown. You had a few that were up by Classen over in the Penn Square Mall area. A very, very few were up north over by Quail. And then you had a small remnant over on the northeast side by Frederick Douglass High School, in some of those wooded areas back there. But most were in the downtown core area. I'd say 70 to 80%. And if you're interested, I'd have that map in an email I could send you.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. And then in terms of other things that we could be doing to help you, you said maybe a bus shelter. What else?
Well, one of my big dreams, as I mentioned earlier, for the facility is a bike repair station. Yeah. And I think that's sort of one of my next goals on the horizon. But for the here and now and just out into the future, I think a bus stop out where we have a curb cut is where I would think would be tremendously helpful. Especially we see a lot of families with small children who come from other shelters and have a half-a-mile walk through the neighborhoods to the shelter. So anyway, there's a lot of different directions we could go with that. But that's really what I wanted to just recognize and to highlight you all again for the work that you're doing already on behalf of the people we serve. So thank you.
And one other suggestion, if you do a bike repair shop, is that Spokie's has a bike repair shop here, and I'm sure they'd be happy to give you a tour and some educational information on how to establish and what needs to be done and what you need. So,
thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I will call our September meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. Now we do have one other citizen to be heard now that we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. I'm Jeff Bezdek. I'm at 1015 North Broadway, Suite 120 in downtown Oklahoma City. That's where my office is, and I reside on the northwest part of the city and not in the public transit area. I thank you for waiting for quorum. I wanted to get this on the record. Pretty appreciative that you have citizens speak at the beginning of the meeting. I would have come earlier, but I run a small business, and it's difficult to deal with staff and do morning meetings. So I served on your MAPS 3 Transit Subcommittee. I served on your Alternatives Analysis Committee for the streetcar system and Health Science Center, and also was involved in a regional transit authority framework that is currently being formatted, ACOG. I'm coming to you today just to call out a few issues regarding making the streetcar successful, avoidable mistakes. And the subcommittee, we've discussed it among everyone who's attended regularly in our last few meetings. We had assumed that the consultant that Cotpa hired would actually ask the subcommittee in charge of building the streetcar system what their operational opinions are on it. We were appointed by Mayor Cornett specifically because we've invested an extraordinary amount of time traveling across the United States and, quite frankly, all over the world. We've been to Qatar, we've been to France, we've been to Germany, we've been, you name it. If it's got a streetcar, some of our subcommittee members have been there. I'm not as privileged, so my limitations have been to the U.S. But we're doing a couple of things that are avoidable mistakes, and one would be not having Sunday service for quite frankly a very small amount of money. $220,000 is the number that I've heard to match the Saturday level of service. We avoid an extraordinary amount of confusion for Michael Scroggins to communicate to the public as to when the streetcar is operating and when it's not, because our understanding is that it will operate on special event days. I'd also assert that we're introducing a Title 9 issue because we're developing inequity between modes. We have moved forward with bus service, which should have been done long ago, as everyone agrees, on Sunday, but not for the streetcar system. And downtown we have mixed socioeconomic residents, of all income levels. And as part of this operating as a cohesive, coherent system with structured operating hours, it creates inequity in the modes and confusion that's very difficult to communicate to visitors, tourists, and the people who live here. And so we were flabbergasted, for one, that we weren't asked our opinion, and then two, that there would be Sunday service, and then three, the downtown Discovery bus was going to be retained, because there was a general assumption that any rubber-tired transit in the downtown core would be dissolved, and those revenues expended to operate a rubber-tired service would be transferred to the streetcar system. And at the time, when Rick Kane was administrator of Cotpa and Metro Transit, we evaluated the areas that the downtown Discovery is attempting to address, being Deep Deuce, Maywood Park, and determined that if pedestrian connections were strengthened between those areas and Bricktown and Automobile Alley, that people could walk as long as there was a reasonable connection and ADA compliance. And since those meetings were held, we've installed those connections. So I understand we had a councilman, and it's unorthodox, but he was threatening litigation about inequity for Sunday service regarding the buses. But I'm absolutely shocked, and I think the majority of the committee is, that quite frankly, we thought we'd be asked, and we also thought that operationally Sunday service for the streetcar system was not going to be a question. And from the beginning, there would be no confusion about when it was going to operate. So I don't even know what to say, but I'd like to go through the process of approaching the City Council or asking that $220,000 be diverted or the downtown Discovery be dissolved so that we can have a competent, integrated transit system. Thank you.
Well, this is just a personal opinion. It took us a good number of years to provide Sunday bus service, and it's a learning curve. What do the citizens of Oklahoma City need? And I think we're going through the same thing with the streetcar. It's a learning curve. We don't know how for sure it's going to be utilized, and I'm sure at some point in the future we'll have Sunday service. But right now, as I said, I think it's a learning curve, and we've got to figure out how the system's going to be utilized.
Mr. Kaufman, there are best practices across the United States. And yeah, I'd say that we are unnecessarily causing confusion in our data by retaining a rubber-tired circulator downtown, because we're potentially cannibalizing riders from the streetcar. So how could we even know what the true ridership is? And then the funds to operate the downtown Discovery actually exceed the cost to operate the rail system. I mean, it's a unanimous, I can tell you, it's a unanimous opinion of the MAPS 3 streetcar subcommittee that Sunday service is a good practice. And because we're spending over $130 million of the citizens' money on this system and handing it over to Cotpa and Embark to operate, we would strongly recommend that you actually pay attention to what we're telling you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any comments by the trust? All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Jason,
Well,
do you all remember when we went to Kansas City? How are they funding their operations up there? Because I think that might be instructive for some stuff here. They're doing it a bit different than we are, right?
Yeah, their operations, their financial model is significantly different from Oklahoma City's.
Their business?
Yeah, they have a business improvement district. I don't know if that's exactly what they call it there in Kansas City, but it's kind of what we would refer to it here. And it's that district and those business owners that pay additional taxes that support some of that operations. I know the city also supports some of the operations, but it is definitely different than ours.
Thank you.
all right, thank you. All right, back to our agenda. We've got four minutes of our regular board meeting of August 2nd, and our parking committee meeting of August 7th, and our joint parking and finance committee meeting of August 9th, and then a special board meeting on August 9th of the board. So I'll take item A. Are there any corrections or deletions or changes? Item B, C, or D? Then I would have a motion to approve all of these minutes.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Opposed? Thank you. Our consent docket, we've got 4 items on the consent docket. Any of those items the trustees would like an explanation of or a discussion on? They're pretty
Move approval of the consent docket.
all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Items for individual consideration, approval of amendment number 1 to the agreement with Herzog Transit Services, Inc. for the streetcar. Jason, any comments?
Yes, just a few comments on this item. The amendment to the agreement with Herzog is outlined in your memo. There's quite a bit of history of how we've got to this point, but as you'll recall, the trust actually approved the agreement with Herzog in June of 2017. And in that original agreement, we had basically included some language that said there would be a 6-month period between Phase 2 of the contract and Phase 3. Phase 2 of the contract is essentially preparing to hire and train and get Herzog staff ready to run the streetcar. And then Phase 3 is actually when we begin revenue service, when we begin providing that service to the public. And anyways, when we put the agreement together, we were thinking that would be about a 6-month period. As the actual timing has worked out, we entered into that Phase 2 in May. So if we stuck with the terms of the original agreement, we would be entering into Phase 3, which is the most expensive phase of the contract, because that's full revenue service, here sometime in November. So really, it's just a change to the agreement to give us the flexibility to make sure that that Phase 3 starts the day that revenue service begins.
All right. Any questions? Then I'd hear a motion to approve item A. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item B is a change order to the Union Station. Jason, if you'd just like to comment on it briefly.
Sure. Well, we continue to maintain Union Station. As you recall, this particular project dealt particularly with drainage and water intrusion into the facility. And as we've worked through the project, there's a couple of items that we need to address that weren't contemplated in the original work. One is the work that's included in the amendment, which is basically repairing, replacing a lot of the mortar on the exterior of the building, again, to keep from water intrusion. And then the change order is actually related to some additional work that's needed to repair a drain pipe that's located inside the wall of the facility. The construction company is actually going to have to remove a significant piece of stone from the wall, repair the pipe, and then put that back together. So the cost for that, as you can see, change order number 2 is $9,919. Amendment number 1, the mortar work, is an additional $33,625. That would bring the new revised contract amount to just over $300,000 for this set of improvements and push the work out to end of November. Actually, November 22nd is the projected completion date.
All right.
Move approval of the amendment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right. 3 items that have to do with parking, items C, D, and F. Corey's going to give us a little discussion on each of the items, and then we'll vote on them.
Good morning. Change order 3 for the Sheridan Walker improvements involves a couple of items. 2 additional light fixtures in a stairwell. The vinyl lettering to match the Arts District garage for the elevators and staircases. And then lastly, a couple pieces of brake metal material that will be used to cover up larger gaps between the pieces of concrete in the garage found after we removed the acoustic ceilings in the elevators. Total value of change orders and the amendment is just over $114,000. Revised contract amount is $1,288,000. Any questions?
Okay. All right. Then item D.
Item D is final acceptance for the Sheridan Walker project. We do have a couple of punch list items that we foresee being taken care of in the next couple of weeks, but we would like to proceed with final acceptance and entering into maintenance bonds.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Corey, where are we on the interior project? When do we think that will be completed?
The interior of the Sheridan Walker, referring to the stripes, the LEDs and whatnot,
right.
That's this project.
Oh, okay. It said exterior
I don't
renovation,
recall
so-
why we called it exterior at the time.
No wonder you had that blank look on it, like, what is she talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was something different.
Yeah, it's just the project started as
Got
trying
it.
to improve the exterior with the canopies, and we expanded it
Got
to
it.
include.
Okay, thank you.
And then item F.
Item F, approval of plans and specifications for Project MB 1343, more easily identifiable, the UCO space at Santa Fe Garage. We want permission to advertise for bids.
Okay.
That was E.
Yeah, that was, I was talking about F. I think you were going to talk about item F also.
Oops, I got misplaced. Are we talking about MidFirst Bank?
Yes. Yeah, just the parking agreement with them.
Yes, same rates as we've discussed before. We just, there was quite a few of agreements that were involved in that agreement that we inherited from other parking operations, and this just simplified the entire agreement, made it for a term of 5 years with 2 one-year extensions possible.
Either Corey or Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but item E was a change because we're only doing the tenant improvements for UCO, not any other improvements to the garage since we've sold the garage.
That is correct.
And is that not these plans and specifications, that's what that's for?
Correct.
Okay. All right, any questions on those? Do I need to vote on each of them separate? All right. Item A, do I have a motion to, item C, do I have a motion to approve?
Move item C.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item D? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item E?
Move the item. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Item F?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Corey. That just leaves one item on our consent docket. Item G is approval of a lease agreement with Downey Contracting to lease a portion of the,
So I believe the memo is pretty self-explanatory there, but yes, we're looking to enter into a short-term, essentially a one-year lease agreement with Downey Contracting, 2,000 square feet, the Union Station facility. Downey is the construction company that is building the park, so it's a convenient place for them to have their construction offices. Then I will point out that we have received FTA approval for incidental use of Union Station for this purpose, and then any revenues generated from the lease will go to support transit operations.
what is still in Union Station? As far as tenants or?
Yeah, we don't have, other than Downey, which will be moving in, we don't have any tenants in Union Station. We still have our some finance and admin staff there in the facility.
Okay. Thank you. All right, any questions? Then I'd have a motion to approve item G.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item is a ratification of claims and payroll. Unless there's any questions by any of the trustees, then I'd have a motion to ratify. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We've got 3 financial reports. One is the interim financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, and then the retirement trust for 12 months, and then our first month of our budget to actual. And I don't know what Jason, my suggestion, and particularly on item A, was once the audit is completed and the auditors have written their letter, then we would have that as an item at one of our trust meetings and have somebody from the finance department to come in and go over that. So other than those comments, Jason, any comments on any of these?
Just to mention that there's also the interim pension report through the end of June of 2018, and that report was reviewed and accepted by the Cotpa Pension Committee on August 21st. And then just a few comments on the budget to actual for the 1 month of the fiscal year ending July 31st. Not a lot of comments, of course, because this is the very first report of the fiscal year, but would direct your attention to page 2 of the budget to actuals, and this is the the third financial report in your packet. And again, just pointing out a couple things there on the revenue side. On our transit operations, you'll notice the fare box revenue has begun the year under target. We're actually $19,500 less in fare box revenue than what we had projected. That variance is offset by an overage or more revenue than we had expected in fare media sales. And we've had a couple of agencies make some larger purchases of bus passes towards the first part of the fiscal year here than what we had anticipated. And then really just directing your attention to the expenditures, nothing of surprise or significance there. Everything's pretty much in line with budget 1 month through the fiscal year. On the next page, though, parking operations, want to mention two items. Again, looking at the operating revenues, you'll notice that the monthly contract revenue is showing $64,000 under budget, and that's, again, 1 month of the fiscal year. That is due to one large contract parking customer that was parking in the Santa Fe. They've relocated. They're now parking in another garage. So that revenue that we had anticipated when we built the budget, really 6 months ago is when we started it, that revenue is no longer coming into the system. And so the parking revenues will vary from the budget over the next few months as we look at the budget to actuals. But as we finalize the sale of the Santa Fe garage, we will come back to the Board of Trustees with an amended budget for our parking operations. And then just looking down at the operating expenditures, and when we look at the streetcar report, it's a similar situation. You'll notice that there's very few expenditures the first part or this first month of the fiscal year, and of course that's because we pay for those contracted services after we receive them, right? So the services we received in July, we'll actually pay those invoices in August. And then looking at river cruises, again, through 1 month of the fiscal year, not much variance between budget to actual. Same situation with Spokies. And then I would point out a new page in your report, page 6 of the budget to actuals. This is our streetcar operations report. So if you'll recall, last fiscal year, we had a line within our transit operations where we accounted for streetcar expenditures essentially in one line or aggregated. We've broke this out for this fiscal year to provide a little bit more detail as we move into operations. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Then I would have a motion to receive our financial reports, items A, B, and C.
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Program reports. Our first program report is a streetcar report. Morning.
Jump right into it. So we are now into September of the month of the streetcar. 98 days away, 3 more board reports. We're not counting though. So we continue to have our committee meetings monthly. We have our rail activation committee, fire and life safety committees, and our safety and security committees. As we're moving closer to getting into operations, we've actually bumped these up to now they're bi-weekly. So every 2 weeks we're having these committee meetings, making sure that we're marching toward the same goal of getting into operations. So one of the cool things that we did this past month, Embark, Oklahoma City Police Department, Oklahoma City Fire Department, the TSA, we developed a tabletop exercise, which is one of our FTA requirements. So kind of set the stage for our field exercise. It's St. Patrick's Day, streetcars traveling westbound on Reno, making that turn. There's a collision, streetcar's derailed, and how does everyone interact, right? How does the police department interact with the streetcar, the fire department? So that's what our tabletop exercise was there to do. We included Public Works. We included all the PIO officers. As you can see from the picture here, it was a pretty good get-together, and everyone worked well together. Everyone learned something from it. So one of the lessons that we learned was that while we've done quite a bit of outreach to our Oklahoma City police and fire, we realized that we hadn't reached very deep into the IMSA community, right? So we took that back. The very next day, we started setting up meetings with IMSA to have them come out and be familiarized with the streetcar. So another thing that we're also doing is Embark, Herzog Transit, Public Works, and Jacobs. We continue our transit signal priority integration committee. And so what that committee does is, since we're able to start operating the streetcar in Bricktown, doing training and testing, we're starting to run the streetcar around Bricktown, look at our cycle times, our headways, those types of things, take that back to the committee and see what we can do to better those times. Something to note is that all of our TWC isn't quite working yet. That's one of the things I've been working on this week. And so we're going to get streetcars back out there and continue our testing to gather more information. You help me out? I don't know what happened. Okay. So another thing that operations is doing is we're updating all the city ordinances, right, to bring in the streetcar into the system. So one of the ordinances that we're doing is Ordinance 3296, which is the ordinance that constitutes what's blocking traffic. And so obviously the streetcar, if it's going along this route, it can't veer around a car. And so this current ordinance right now is a vehicle can be parked in a parallel parking spot, but as long as their tires are 18 inches away from the curb, then the police officers can't do anything for that vehicle to get it out of the way, right? So our ordinance, what that does is it states that any vehicle that is over the solid white line that's marking the parallel parking, that gives the police officer the ability to tow that vehicle or, get it out of the way, essentially, right? So, and I continue to say that, our goal isn't to tow vehicles just to get them out of the way. Our first step is to try to find the owner and see if the owner can move the vehicle so that we can continue on the path. Our last step is actually getting the tow truck out there. And some of the other ordinances are, updating the definitions so that we can put the streetcar into the definitions, putting the ordinances in place that allow the streetcar to stop at streetcar stops. And then also, so we've got some streetcar-specific signal lights. And so the MUTCD is what kind of governs that, the signals, but we wanted to make sure that the city ordinances cover those signals also. So we've got, you've got your special signals for the stop, go, and diverging movements. So we updated the city ordinances to include those. And then we've also got ordinances that dictate what are streetcar-specific lanes. And Public Works has the ability now through this ordinance to dictate what that streetcar-specific lane is. And also, Embark and Maps, we're working jointly to provide information back to the SSO from our recent readiness review. So we had our readiness review back in July 16th, that entire week. And we've got a draft report, and we're providing comments back to the SSO. And then this picture here is one of the social media outputs that we did, trying to remind people to park behind the white line. Give it a shot. All right. So we continue our systems integrated testing. This is a picture of one of those tests. This is ML-111 OCS charging bar. And so what we're doing here is, systems integration. So we're making sure that the vehicle integrates with the overhead charging bars at stop 5. And so we simulate what our service would be. So there's a potential that we could have 2 vehicles at stop 5 and have vehicles back at the storage and maintenance facility all charging off the same substation. So we wanted to max out that substation to see if there's any faults before we ever go into service. We performed this test. There were a few things that we're going to tweak, and so this test will be re-performed here coming up shortly. One of the funner tests that we did was we got to levitate a streetcar. Now, we performed a portable jack interface, and so if you've ever been out to the streetcar maintenance facility, you've seen these portable jacks that plug into the side of the streetcar, and then we lifted the streetcar up in the air. And so what that does is that allows us the ability to work on the bottom side of the streetcar, detruck the streetcar, and work on the truck assemblies. This test went perfectly. It's a little slower than jacking your car up. It takes about 8 minutes to lift 80,000 pounds in the air, but it worked perfectly. The jacks stayed perfectly aligned with the streetcar, no leaning or tipping or anything like that, so you couldn't have asked for a better test. So going back to our field exercise, we learned that we needed to reach a little deeper into some of our first responder groups. And so this is a picture of Eugene taking the charge of doing that familiarization training. So we bring IMSA, police, or fire. We dig deeper into their groups. They come out. We walk them through the streetcar. We show them where all the emergency release levers are, the access points, those types of things, so that as much as the fire department loves to just get into things, we show them the easy way where you just pull this lever instead of using your axe to get into it. So we continue with our operations hiring. So we've got our first 6 operators on board. They've made it through their class time, and they will be out on the streetcar tracks starting next week. They'll actually be out there a little bit this afternoon on the NRT, but we're pushing to get them out into Bricktown starting next week, hopefully. We continue our roster here. So we've got our operators. We've got Janet, Greg, Eric, Tony, Keith, and Danny. They just wrapped up their classes. And so, like I said, we're excited to get them out onto the lead track, the NRT, and then out into Bricktown shortly. And then also we've got Mr. Kenworth and Mark McGee. There are some of our technicians. They just started here recently. And we're marching forward. We'll have another group of operators starting a little later this month. With all this training that they have to do, we want to make sure that we give them the correct kind of training so we don't overload our classes, keep the classes kind of small, and then just stagger them out throughout the remaining months. So one of the fun things that we get to do, since we've got a new facility and streetcars coming on board, is we get to host different groups that want to come and take a look at the storage and maintenance facility and take a look at the streetcars. So this is Australia Public Works Committee. They came into Oklahoma City. Mr. Winger, he kind of gave them a tour of all of Oklahoma City, and one of the stops was the storage and maintenance facility, so we got a chance to show them around and let them ask questions. So that was pretty fun. And then Mr. McKay, he always loves to bring Oklahoma City or Embark bus drivers over to the storage and maintenance facility and let them take a look at the full operations of what Embark does. And so we get the joy of having the bus operators come by and take a look at the streetcar facility also. And then we also had the STEAM group during the summer. They brought a bunch of kids by that were interested in engineering careers and those types of things. And so they got to come by, see the streetcar facility. We got to talk about the engineering that goes into bringing it all together, the building of the rails, the overhead wires and stuff. And I think they got a pretty good kick out of it. I know I did. It was pretty fun stuff. So construction of the Bricktown Loop continues. They've essentially wrapped up most of the work there. This past week and the week before that, they were working on punch list items. There were a few grates that needed to be adjusted, those types of things. They needed to clean up some of the stations where they'd been grazed with vehicles going by. So they've got that stuff cleaned up, and so we're looking at getting back out into Bricktown coming next week, start training. And our September date is still holding. Really the only thing that's left there is that Sheridan Mickey Mantle signal light. And then the downtown loop, those dates are still holding. Downtown substantial completion October, final completion of all work in November. This is a picture of the wire pull that they did here recently. This is coming south on Broadway, making that turn on 4th Street. It's pretty cool to see just the amount of people that it takes to do this kind of work and the engineering that goes into it, just making those corners. You've got your span wires that are pulling that overhead wire through the corner, making that curve. So always fun to get to share these kind of pictures. Track construction, so again, we're 100% complete with utilities, 99% complete with track demo. We're wrapping up the track installation, 96%. One of the things I want to make sure you focus on this slide here is just the percent of increase. So we've had, minus this week, we've had really good weather, so we've got to see construction really, drive to home, getting things wrapped up, and so we're excited to see us coming to a close. Vehicles. So we received vehicle number 6 this past week. It's pretty awesome. I would share a picture, but everybody's seen it by now, right? So we received Bermuda Green, and we're working to get those vehicles accepted by City Council. And then the final vehicle, vehicle number 7, so it's wrapping up its interior installation. These pictures here just show the amount of wiring that goes into the streetcars. It's pretty extensive. And then one of the cool things that we're going to get to do with this streetcar, I think I might have mentioned it last month, but I want to make sure you are aware. So vehicle number 7 will actually be going to Revolution in October. And so our streetcar will be one of the centerpieces of the Revolution. It'll be there on display for everybody to see. We're pretty excited about that. Any questions?
I hate to ask this, but have we had any bus drivers that would like to transfer to the streetcar?
We've had a few that were interested, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was one of our goals, with Sunday service coming up, we're definitely not trying to poach operators, bus operators. So we're if they're interested, we're not going to turn them away, but we also know that they've got a pretty great thing going on in Burt.
All right.
What did the kids say about, I'm very interested in this because, I teach the college prep program there, and a lot of them want to be engineers, and when I talk to them about the streetcar and electricity, so I can't imagine actually having those sort of students right there in front of it. What did they say about that?
The first thing they said was, do you have any water? Because it's about 100 degrees there, so it's pretty hot for everybody. But they were definitely interested in just, one of the main questions we got was, is somebody driving them? People still don't quite understand that there's operators that operate the streetcars. It was kind of fun explaining to them, how the radiuses work. With the streetcar, it's not like a car where you can just kind of turn easily. You've got to work with the truck assemblies and radiuses of the rails. So yeah, they asked, like I've said before, the kids always ask the good questions. They're not afraid to ask the tough ones.
They asked me yesterday to ask you about the operator, and I told them that, but they don't believe me. They never believe the adult in the room. They never. They also wanted me to ask, how do they keep from getting electrocuted when there's all this electricity feeding into the line? I was like, oh, you adorable children. So what is the answer I can give?
So, the answer is, don't climb the poles and touch the wire, but, the wire is, it's safe. It's 18'6" above the ground. Really, that's, as long as you don't throw a ladder up there and try to climb and touch it, you really have no worries to worry about. Everything's, you've got insulators, you got insulated joints where the wires are connected, those types of things. Unless you jump out into the middle of the street and touch the wire, there's really nothing to worry about.
I will let Martha know. She was very interested.
But in the event of an accident and one of the poles are knocked down, can you shut the electricity off?
Yeah, absolutely. So the storage and maintenance facility at our OCC, the Operations Control Center, will have the SCADA system that is basically it's computer control of the entire system. And so with a few clicks of the button, we can shut down power to the entire system. And then what we do is we go out to the substation and then do the lockout, tagout, and make sure that nobody can turn the power back on manually or remotely while somebody's doing work on it. So yeah, we've got those standard operating procedures in place.
But can you actually isolate an area too and just turn the power off to that so the rest of the system could operate theoretically?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way that works is you've got the Bricktown OCS. That's completely separate from the Midtown downtown area, but you can, even at that point, you can still isolate those areas too. So and we've got it set up where it's redundant, so if one of the substations at Bricktown goes down, the other substation can still charge the entire system, so you can still operate. So it's got redundant built into it, and then it's also got joints where you can isolate certain areas to shut down.
Along the lines of safety and working around the overhead wire system, many of the poles are signed, high voltage, danger. And then we also have done a lot of training with city staff that may end up working within the streetcar safety envelope. And then our plan is, and Jesse, you might explain, how we plan to basically train essentially any contractor, right, that's going to work in that that safety envelope about working around the electrical system.
Yeah, so it's called track access permitting, right? So right now, since it's under construction, Herzog-Stacy controls all the track access around the streetcar route. We're working towards setting a date so that when it gets closer to operations, Herzog Transit will take over that track access permitting. So what that looks like is if a contractor goes and applies for a permit in the development services, there's a form that's attached to their permit that they fill out if they're going to be doing any work along the streetcar route. Those drawings the OKC streetcar group will actually become a sign-off, similar to like you've got the planning department, DDRC, those types of people that are a sign-off on drawings and permits. OKC streetcar becomes a sign-off, so we get the drawings, we're aware of what's going to be going on around that area. And then also part of that access is that if you're going to be doing work around the streetcar route, we get notification, so we're aware of what's going on there. And then kind of what getting to Jason's point, so when we take over that access permitting, we'll be setting up a training that will happen every Tuesday. And so if you're applying for a permit, part of that permitting procedure is that you have to come and take our training and get, similar like Herzog Stacy does, they've got a sticker that you can put on your hard hat. We'll be providing them badges that if you're working along the streetcar route, you have to have that badge. And if you're not, then we'll ask you to remove yourself from the streetcar route and go get the appropriate training. And like Jason said, no one's going to be along the streetcar route without the appropriate training. And that includes public works, utility workers, the trash truck drivers, anybody that could be window washers, anybody that could be working along the streetcar route.
All right. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Jesse. Long-range planning. Larry, we haven't had a report from you in a while, so.
You're right. It's been three months. I've got 4 items to cover. I'll cover them quickly. One's about the BUILD grant. Another is about the Northwest BRT and the NEPA process. A third thing about a TAP grant that we had for some bus shelters, and finally a word about ACOG. Pretty busy summer with applying for grants. We actually applied for one called the 5339B for a lot of men's facility stuff. I won't go into the details, but very much need those types of improvements. But the BUILD grant, on the next slide, just to give you a little sense, this really wasn't just Embark. We had a team effort because we met with the Oklahoma City Planning Department, with Public Works. We had some assistance from Half and Associates, our consultant, and we even had a meeting over at ODOT with about 10 or 12 people. And basically, this is a little different than what we applied for with the Tiger grant back in 2017. For instance, we wanted to make sure that our ask was only 50% of the project cost, and so we asked for about $14.4 million. The typical grant last time around for Tiger was about 12, so we wanted to kind of get closer to that figure. And when I mentioned about teamwork and other things, we reached out to a lot more entities in the community, had 26 different letters of support. About 4 or 5 were from major companies. Actually, their presidents or CEOs signed the letter. A number of nonprofits signed on as supporters of it. And in the process of getting those letters, these entities become a lot more aware of the project and the details, and they get a chance to ask questions. So that was very, very helpful. We were careful to try to address even more strongly the different federal criteria that are laid out if you want to receive the grant. And BUILD, stands for Better Utilizing Investment to Leverage Development. BUILD. And so there's definitely an emphasis on transit-oriented development as well with the grant. The next slide, again, is just kind of, shows you with this kind of darker purple line how it would start downtown, go out Classen, turn around at Meridian Avenue. You've seen all this before, and basically the idea is to have a system that runs about the same hours and frequency as streetcar. Hopefully we'll be able to attract a lot more choice riders to this route with that type of service. And then the next slide gives you a sense of where the money would come from for the matching the grant as well as how it would be expended. And I should mention that that the citizens, well, the CNEAB, which are the citizens who basically manage and monitor the Better Street Safer City sales tax from last September, they had authorized some funds in their plan for some improvements in this vicinity, and so even though they're authorized, they'll be sure to make sort of a formal recognition or approval of those funds. And those are important because the federal government said, we want to see you bring new local money to the table, and they don't count the general obligation bond issue approved by the citizens. Sales tax is what counts. And so that was really another bit of the teamwork with the planning department. On the costs, on a $28 million project, only about 20% or $5 million is for buses, because really the pedestrian crossings and the signalization become so important to our customers and to a lot of other people in the community. The next slide gives you a little sense of the timeline that was put into the grant application. We'll find out whether or not we were awarded a grant by December 18th, according to the federal regulation. And, so we'll know something later this year. We know the competition will be very, very tough, once again, just like it has been in the past. And the idea is that if we could get the grant, we'd be operational, about the first quarter of 2023. But the first step really is getting through federal environmental clearance. And so in the next slide, and you see that's 2019, but the next slide is really the second item of my 4. These next 3 items go pretty quickly. So NEPA is a very important step because, the federal government doesn't want federal money spent on a project if it's not really being for good stewardship of those funds. And so the NEPA process gets you through a more specific level of design, such as on the various stops. You might go back to the previous slide if you would. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Not there. I must have left that one out. But NEPA is a very, very important step, and we're in the process of hiring the consultant for that. We should be awarding that contract in October. We feel good about that company's qualifications, and we've got the scope and price kind of down to what we think is appropriate. So this next item is about sort of the fun of looking at before and after slides, okay? Way back in 2014, the city and Cotpa really were just getting started with a lot of sidewalk improvements around the city. And so we applied for this grant, and it's a grant that really, the grant and the construction is managed by ODOT. And this summer, we've finally gotten underway with it. And in the next slide, you get a sense of the atmosphere that we had back in 2014. The slide at the right, a bus shelter that's leaning and says, "Do you have schizophrenia?" Well, back in those days, there were a lot of things that we were trying, but that sign sort of shows some of the disconnect and some of the things that we really needed to do. You see the sandy path to a bus shelter, and we had a major hospital on the south side that had a bus stop, but there was no sidewalk to that stop. And so this was kind of the environment back then. And as you know, the voters, the city, you all, the city council, have done so much in terms of sidewalk access and bus stops and bus shelters. So the next three slides real quickly are the before and afters. So the red box at the top left shows you a location on Northeast 36 where the bus shelter was up in the grass. A person would have had to have hopped the curb to get to it. But at the far right, you see how it was improved with the sidewalk and the ramp. And so what used to be kind of an orphan bus shelter that had been there 30 years now has decent access. We didn't know it at the time, but across the street was where the Northeast Shopping Center would wind up getting a lot of improvements. And so the setting around these shelters has changed. The next slide is actually over on Virginia, just south of 10th Street. Same kind of story on the right. Got this not very accessible bus shelter that had been there for 25 or 30 years. On the right, you see the improvements that just went in a few weeks back. And then the next two slides, housing is so important because if you can get people to ride the bus, basically they're going to start to ride it close to where they live. And so apartments are one of those places for sure. So you see the before shot where you got to get through the grass, through the wet grass or whatever. On the left, you see this very long sidewalk to the very first curb cut. And then the final slide about this is over on Northeast 36th Street, where same thing, orphan bus shelter. You had a connection to the street, but not really a connection to the shelter. So these are all basic steps, sort of a remedial thing to deal with some old bus stop locations. Now, my final slide and final comment is that we do a lot of work with ACOG. This has been a summer where ACOG has reached out to its member entities and is basically asking for input on how to evaluate projects that are proposed for the $16, $17, $18 million a year that come their way. What they and the member entities want is to try to make it to where these funds are used more the way that their 2040 long-range plan has priorities, and transit's one of those priorities. So we've tried to do a lot to try to help them with language, with ways of looking at those criteria to help give transit a little bit better footing. And then the final thing about ACOG is that their new executive director is now on the job, in town, all the time as of this week. So thank you.
Any questions, Larry? All right, thank you. Good report. Thank you. All right, our last program report is Marketing, Customer Relations, and Technology.
Good morning.
Morning.
We'll jump right in. First thing we've been really focused on over the last few months since I last spoke was the streetcar messaging, especially centered around safety. We've got a few things there that are coming up, and that'll guide you with what to expect. But in the meantime, what we have been doing is we've been meeting with all of the business alliance meetings in the downtown area, from Midtown, Automobile Alley, Bricktown, Midtown, Bank of Oklahoma, Rotary Clubs, Urban Neighbors, and even the Chamber News Bureau. And we've been engaging them and helping them better understand what the safety messaging is about, how they can help us get the word out to their employees, to their vendors, and even the service delivery industry that services them in regards of delivery service, I should say, and helping them understand about how to deliver their packages and serve their businesses. And they were very much interested and on board with us in trying to communicate the message that, these holdups that can occur when we're in operation will impact our ability to maintain a certain type of schedule and a frequency, and giving some average times of how long it takes to remove a vehicle from other streetcar cities. Many of them were on board with doing self-reporting and helping other people become more aware of how that will impact the success of a schedule for the streetcar. Another thing that was mentioned just a little bit earlier is the downtown circulator that we've known as Downtown Discovery, and that has been rerouted. I do want to add that we had had many community meetings, and that we've also had conversations since the new route design with our downtown community, specifically the Deep Deuce and the residential areas. And while there is connectivity with the streetcar nearby, because of the topography that is in that area, especially in the Deep Deuce, and there's some up and down hills, there were many residents who actually showed great appreciation for this connector that'll help them get there. If you have a week-long rain event like we've had, that's going to deter them making that walk or outdoor trek there. But also just the topography there is hindering for those that have difficulty walking longer distances or in the sun or in weather. So they've shown great appreciation so far. This is just the outside of the bus that you'll see. We have 2 buses dedicated to that service. So that makes it easily recognizable. We have stop signage in final production now that'll be out there, and so we'll start to see some of that connectivity and those numbers and ridership start to climb as people become more familiar. And we have an event where we're going to be talking directly with Deep Deuce residents. They're having a film showing, and we'll be out there next Friday evening with the bus, also with some giveaways to, again, just talk to them about how they can use this and how it's going to help them make that connection to the streetcar a little more seamless. One thing we've been working on in parking is just to make those kiosks that we've had there a lot more noticeable. They kind of blended into the walls, and we continue to field questions about where are they, how do I even use them? So we're trying to improve how noticeable they are, and at the same time how much easier it'll be if they know how to use them. So we're trying to provide that information a little more up front. Just like with the on-street parking meters, it's one of those kind of learning experiences for everyone, and we're also learning how to best maybe communicate how to use this machinery. What seems readily apparent to us may not be always apparent to someone else, so we're always tweaking these, and you'll see these continue to evolve over time.
I want to mention, Michael, I use the Arts District garage as an alternate gym. I walk in the garage. It's great because you get the up, And almost every time I'm in there, someone asks me, what do I do with this card? How do I get out of the garage? And so I would recommend that not just at the pay stations, but maybe at the elevators or other signage in the garage to kind of give people a better comfortable feeling. I know one day, 2 weeks ago, Jason ran into somebody who had gotten to the entrance to the garage, entrance gate, and decided that they didn't really know what to do when they got there, and they tried to come back out of the garage in the entrance ramp, and that wasn't very helpful to getting in and out of the garage. So
Certainly.
I do think that it's a panic moment for people when they suddenly realize I'm in the garage and I don't know what to do. So I just wanted to recommend other signs, other places, so that people are aware that that's where the pay station is.
We'll definitely do that. Thank you for that. That's great. And I've seen many city staff persons around too with parking meters and those type of things. They'll stop and help residents. I think that's so encouraging that just the general population for the city is just very helpful And I think that's just a great attribute. Another thing that we've had is the mobile ticketing app. We have been in testing mode. Just a few stats I want to share with you. We've got 37 testers that have been trying it out. We didn't, and they did this all on their own accord. They've already invested over $700 in fare revenue since we started testing, and that's over 160 passes sold. So just off 37 people. And that's the neat thing, too, is it's been difficult in the past to track, activity from specific people. It's always been trips, right? Because we don't always know how many of those trips are the same person or not. So this will give us another step closer to some data that we'll be able to use, and we'll continue to refine that and learn more about it. And so we'll continue to ramp up our conversation with the public about adopting this more. That next week's event with Deep Deuce, that's something we'll be really heavily talking to them about and promoting. And then as we draw closer with streetcar service as well, you'll start seeing that message become more evident more and more. We're doing a slow launch because, again, we want to tackle any issues that may occur. This is one of those first chance opportunities that's known with app development, is that if they have a really poor first experience, it's going to take a lot to try to entice them to come back to that app. So again, we're just being overly cautious. Even though it's well tested in other communities, we know every community is different, and we just want to make sure. And then one of the things, this is just one thing, but there's many going on the technology side, and especially in regards to the streetcar. But there's things in parking and the other services as well. But specifically, I wanted to show you, because I know you've seen the pylons and the platforms for the streetcars taking shape all around the downtown area. So inside this pylon, we have quite a few different components that are independent systems that all work together, though, that will allow us to communicate on the digital screens there. And the great thing about it is we've been able to be proactive in making it so that we can do this remotely. We don't have to go to each pylon to make an update and push that. This will allow us to do it at the South May facility. In reality, anywhere in the world that we have an internet connection, we'll be able to talk to these each individual and send specific messages, even just to one if we wanted to, or to the whole system all at once. So we'll have a robust system that's going to serve us well. And we'll begin testing that, and you'll see some of those screens in the near future of what that will look like. And we'll be, again, seeking feedback, because, again, we expect that we're going to be speaking to an audience that's primarily not familiar with using transit. And so this will be that first introduction. We want to make sure that it is easy for them to understand and to know what to expect there. In addition, we made a trip to California to inspect the SCADA system that will be here helping us manage and monitor the system, especially in the Operation Control Center. And then just the traction, sub-power, goodness, I always get tongue-tied. The TPSS, I always get that messed up in my mind. But anyway, those will help us manage that power flow there. And then finally, I just want to share that we've got, a line of events coming up. One that failed to make it up there. Also, there was our final Third Friday Free that is on September 21st. Again, those have been a great program in allowing us to communicate about the benefits of managing our air quality and being proactive about that, and that's how this program was designed to function. We'll see that hopefully pick back up again in the spring during our ozone awareness season, and we'll continue to help share that message there. And then also, please come out if you have an opportunity to come see us at any of these events and kind of learn about what we'll be communicating regarding our services. And, of course, the health fair. I think it's our 11th health fair that's coming up, so we're excited to partner with the Oklahoma City Community or the Oklahoma City County Health Department for that as well. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you for addressing that downtown circulator. That kind of at least addresses the issues raised by the citizens about the integration with the streetcars.
Just wondered, have you marketed, or have we marketed the streetcar to the community, all of the cities around Oklahoma City, like maybe through ACOG, or just about the opening of the streetcar, maybe inviting them? I know there used to be a mayor's group where all the mayors of the different cities were together. I don't know if that still exists or not. So just inviting them maybe now for one day to try out when we open open to streetcar.
That's a great idea. I know that there are quite a few different groups that we're looking at, and that may be one that's already on the list. And that's even to our federal delegation, all the way down to local elected officials as well. So there's a big list that's being generated now. I would say, too, that you'll probably start, again, going back to that list before, but you'll start seeing more about the service and promotion of the service itself, service hours, how to use it coming up. Our focus right now has solely been on the safety, again, because we're teaching a community that's not interacted with rail, especially surface level rail in the area and for a very long time. So you'll start seeing that, and you'll start seeing it as a board also in advance of that going out.
All right. Any other questions? Michael, thank you. Good report. I would have a motion to receive our program reports. All in favor? Jason, we've got a new employee. Would you like to introduce him?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to introduce and recognize Dan McKeehan. He's our new operations manager. Dan joins us from, he has an extensive background in transit, probably too many experiences to list for this amount of time, but recently in Reading, Pennsylvania, at South Central Transit there, some experience at Foothill Transit in Southern California, RTD in Denver, and the list goes on, right, Dan? There's a few others.
Yes, I transitioned from the LTL trucking industry 9 years ago into transit, and the majority of my work has been in the private sector, working for large transportation providers such as MP Transportation and First Transit. I've held regional operations roles, VP of Business Development and General Manager position throughout California, Colorado, and then most recently Director of Transportation right in Pennsylvania. So really happy to be here, love the environment, and I appreciate the opportunity.
We're glad to have you, Dan.
And you know what you were getting in for when you see the size of Oklahoma City and try to service that area. So, easy peasy. Thank you. All right. James, any other comments?
No, sir.
Okay. No?
No, sir.
Jason? This is a first.
I have something, and I
Oh,
don't have
okay.
anything. I would like to introduce Jill Burnett, and she's from my office, and she's going to be helping with Cotpa issues, as well as the zoo and the River Trust. So she's just all-purpose. She'll know anything you want to know. So she will be helping me.
So she'll fill in for you occasionally?
Yes.
Okay. At large, or whatever we call Laura, or what?
Yeah,
Okay. Surrogate, okay. All right. If there's nothing else, then I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you.